It was pointed out to me once that if all I do is philosophy, and then people leave me, so then their attitude is, he did the philosophy, and you can only get philosophy from him. If I take things from the Chumash and show you how they fit into the words of the Chumash, then the person could say, well, okay, he found it in the Chumash, but I learned Chumash from somebody else, they can find it also. And that's true. That's true. So sometimes I like to go through a story and... Okay. So take a look on page 19. This is the story of Cain and Abel. As I will show you, there's a surface story and then there's a very deep background to the story. And I'm not going to explain everything. There are a lot of things here that are interesting and important and puzzling, which I'm not going to talk about. I have one theme that I would like to bring out. So chapter 4 at the bottom of the page. The man knew his wife Eve, which means they had relations, and she conceived and bore Cain, or in Hebrew, Cain, saying, I've acquired a man with Hashem. Okay, what that means with Hashem, I'm not going to talk about, but I want you to note is that his name means acquisition. Cain, Kanisi, Kuf Nun. And in English, the word acquisition is beautifully ambiguous. I think quite appropriately ambiguous. Acquisition can mean a thing acquired, or it can mean the process of acquiring. And in the Hebrew, the root carries both meanings, and that's his name. His name comes from that idea of acquisition. And additionally, she bore his brother Abel. Abel, Hevel in Hebrew. What does that name connote? So if you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, Koheles, in the back of the book, that's exactly where I'm going. That's the first verse in the book of Ecclesiastes. Take a look on page 1278. The second verse, if you look at the Hebrew, at the end of the first line, Havel Havalim, Amar Koheles, Havel Havalim Akol Havel. He uses the word Hevel 5 times. Havel Havalim, Havel Havalim Akol Hevel. Now, your helpful, friendly English translation says, futility of futilities. Everything is futility. Well, that's what Hevel means, roughly. It means something that's empty of value, of significance, of meaning, of consequence, just floating. You know? Froth on the wave. Just floating. So, in a certain sense, the names of these two characters are opposites. And the names in Hebrew are all meaningful. So the names carry an idea. It's not like George and Frank and Philip, although Philip is a word, Sam. He's acquisition, and Hevel is wasteland, meaningless. Let's see how that contributes to the story. Top of page 21, it says, Hevel, I'm going to say the Hebrew names, became a shepherd, and Cain became a tiller of the ground. Even though, who's the older brother? Cain. But it tells you about their economics, putting Hevel first. After a period of time, Cain brought an offering to Hashem of the fruit of the ground. And Hevel, also he, I'm changing the translation to make it a little more literal, Hevel, also he brought of the firstlings of his flock and from the choicest. Hashem turned to Hevel and his offering, and the verb in Hebrew indicates turning and accepting. So Hashem turned and accepted Hevel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he did not turn and accept. This annoyed Cain exceedingly. Yeah, that's how you say it in London. In New York you say he was outraged. Thanks a lot. Exceedingly annoyed indeed. And his countenance, which means his face, fell, he was depressed. So let's analyze a little bit here. You know what's going to happen, right? Cain kills Hevel. Does it surprise you that Cain is the one who initiates sacrifice?
No, it's Abel.
Indeed, the text stresses that Hevel comes second. What word in the text stresses that he's second? Also. Hevel then also bringeth. Also he. Yeah, okay, also. But Cain's the one who initiated it. If he's the villain, if he's the one who's going to commit murder, it's not obvious why he should be the one to initiate. And that Hevel just imitates him. Okay. Shem said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen, which means you're depressed? Surely, if you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. But if you do not improve yourself, sin rests at the opening. It should be, not door, but opening. Its desire is toward you, yet you can conquer it. Now, I must tell you that when I was a freshman in college, it was a required course to take world history. And the professor, who was a celebrated professor, conducted his classes by reading from his book, reading word for word, because it was assumed that we were illiterate and wouldn't be able to read. So he read from Edgar Johnson. And when he came to the history of the Hebrews, right, the Hebrew God is the storm god, the lightning god who strikes down sinners and destroys cities of rebels, etc., etc., etc. Well, let's see now. Here's Cain. Cain makes an offering, and Hashem doesn't accept it. Let's see what Hashem's speech is like. Is this thundering from the heavens and striking him dead? He says, why are you angry and why are you depressed? Surely if you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. There's a way back. The door isn't closed. No, I'm not going to destroy you. The future is open. You could improve yourself and be forgiven. Well, there's a reality factor. If you don't, sin rests at the door, and it desires toward you. It wants to trip you up, but you can conquer it. Seems to me this speech is like a sandwich. It starts with encouragement, it ends with encouragement, and in the middle there's a reality factor. You know, there are stakes and there's the possibility of loss. This does not sound like the God of vengeance thundering from the heavens. Well, poor Johnson, you know, he didn't have to read the book to write that. He just took it out of popular culture. Okay, enough. Cain spoke with his brother Abel. It happened when they were in the field. Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Shem said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? That phrase has become famous throughout Western culture. Brother? What's that to me? And then Hashem said, what have you done? Your voice of your brother's blood cries out from you to the ground. I know you killed him, etc., etc. So the Shem Shmuel raises the questions that I raised. I took them from him, and the name of the brothers' names. And he says there's a certain deep background to this story which makes sense of all the details that we mentioned. Let's take the names again. Acquisition. This person, Cain, is full of himself. I'm strong, I'm talented, I have resources, I have projects, there are many things that I could do. Hevel is like a mid-20th century existentialist. Nothing is meaningful, nothing is valuable, nothing is true, nothing is good, nothing is right. We're just floating. We're floating through life, Camus of the stranger, just floating through life with no beginning, middle, or end. Now, says the Shem Shmuel, these two character types, let me call them the full and empty character types, each of these character types has a positive development and a negative development. The positive development is to say, I'm so strong, I'm so clever, I'm so capable. What project is there that's worthy of my talent? I don't want to waste my great talent on something that's trivial, something that has no meaning, certainly not something that's negative. I want to find something that's worthy of my dedication. My dedication is not trivial. I'm going to contribute a lot. I should contribute to something worthwhile. If he does that, and he investigates thoroughly and responsibly, he will discover that the world has a creator, that creator invests the world with his concern and his love and his designs for creating a future, that there's a way to be part of building that future, and he will choose that as his focus. The negative development would be to say, I'm so great, I'm so powerful, I'm so talented, everything else should serve me. I'm the pinnacle. I'm the top of the chain. And everything else should be secondary to me. That's the negative development. Same thing with Hevel, the empty personality type. There's a positive development and a negative development. The positive development is to say, yes, I have no meaning, no significance, no value in my life alone. But maybe if I attached myself to something that I could be part of, that would give me a significance, a meaning, and a value. I'll give you two examples. There were people in the Second World War, Americans, who were not eligible for the draft, to be drafted into the army, and who volunteered to fight in the army. Because they said, right now, there's nothing more important than stopping the Nazis. And I know I'm risking my life. I can't sit on the sideline when this effort is going on to stop the Nazis. I want to participate. And even if there are right now 2 million soldiers in the Allied side, and if I'll join, it'll be 2,000,001, and you won't be able to measure the difference in the quantity of output, still, I can't sit on the sidelines. This is too important for me to ignore. That's a way of attaching yourself to something which is so important that it sheds an importance on your life. The other example that I give is when, I think it was 1962, when JFK said, by the end of the decade we'll be on the moon, which was really quite an audacious thing to say. And then he was assassinated. He didn't see it. In 1969, Neil Armstrong set his foot on the moon. There may have been 10,000 people working on that project, all different parts. Now imagine that Fred is a person who tests and maintains computers. He has certain tests that he runs the computer through, and if it needs fixing, he fixes it. And he's just going through all the installations that are working on the moonshot and checking the computers and repairing them. How do you think he felt when Neil Armstrong put his foot on the moon, and you could see it, it was televised at the time? The thrill. This is what we did. We put a man on the moon. Now compare that with someone who is a person maintaining computers with the same techniques as this fellow, and he's working in a factory that produces television sets to destroy the human mind. If his company makes a lot of money, I don't think he can take the same pride in his accomplishment. We produced a product that corrupts culture, and by the way, early television was very good. When it became democratized, it became terrible. I remember the invention of television. So here again, using these skills to cooperate in putting a man on the moon gives his computer repairing activities a great meaning that it otherwise wouldn't have. Okay, so now we have two personality types, full and empty, and two developments, positive and negative. Now here's the Shem Shmuel's first original thought, I think, and that is that Hevel and Cain and Hevel represent the negative development of their personality types, both of them. Cain is full of himself, and he feels he's the top of the mountain, and he's the most important thing in the world, and this is something which everything should serve him. Hevel is a drifter. He's a drifter because nothing's worth investing in, because nothing has any meaning or purpose or value. Now Shem Shmuel asks, which of the two of them is likely first to think, maybe my thinking needs an adjustment. Maybe there's something else that I have to take account of. Maybe my orientation isn't quite right. Now, I could hear people disagree about this, but he said Cain is more likely because Cain has a project. He has a vision. I'm going to rule the world, and everybody else is going to serve me. And in working on that project, he will find obstacles. Some of them will be psychological, some of them will be economic, some of them will be medicine-related. Sometimes he plans a mass movement, and there's a typhoon, and it goes to pieces. So in working to conquer the world, so to speak, he recognizes there are limits to his power. There are other agencies that he can't control, and you have to confront them. He, too, may, at a certain point, realize that the world is not ownerless, it's not random, it's not accidental. There's a power that's managing it, and realize I've got to make my peace with that power. I have to adjust to it, or get it to adjust to me. I have to deal with it. So, he realizes there's a higher power. What is he going to do about it? Well, he has a project. If that power opposes him, it's going to make it very difficult to succeed. So maybe there's some way I can get that power on my side. So he offers a sacrifice. Rashi says the quality of his sacrifice, the fruit of the ground, was inferior. It was poor quality produce. Let's go back to the verse and see if we can figure out how Rashi deduced that the produce was of poor quality. Verse 3, start with verse 3. After a period of time, Cain brought an offering to Hashem for the fruit of the ground, and as for Abel, as for Abel, also he brought of the firstlings of his flock, and from the choices, Hashem turned to Abel to his offering. Cain, an offering, did not turn. Where does Rashi see an indication that Cain's sacrifice was second class?
Justification for Abel when he chose from the choices.
Okay, what about the juxtaposition of Cain and Hevel? Look what it says about Hevel. The firstborn and the best. As the person who taught it to me said, imagine you ask a teacher about two students, Peter and Paul. The student says, Peter always has his essays in on time, and his answers to his questions are thoughtful and meaningful and relevant and well phrased, and his test papers are expressed well, and so on and so on. And Paul always comes on time. Did the teacher say anything bad about Paul? Well, sort of yes and no. We didn't say anything bad about Paul, but certainly indicated that there's a lot going for Peter that Paul doesn't have. So by juxtaposing the two of them, you could draw the inference that if the Torah tells us that Hevel's was the best and doesn't say anything about Cain's, at least the Cain's wasn't the best. Suppose somebody said, yeah, Rabbi, I could hear that, but why don't you make the obvious proof? The obvious proof is that God accepted Hevel's offering and didn't accept Cain's offering. Why couldn't that be Rashi's source? And it can't be. Why not?
Because could be other reasons.
Yes. There are many, many different reasons why it could be that God will accept one without the other. Let's suppose that Cain's produce is of the finest quality, but it's stolen. That could be a reason not to accept it. So, from the fact that he doesn't accept it, doesn't follow that it's of poor quality. But definitely it's a question of, when comparing it to Hevel's, and with Hevel's praise as being a top quality, you could infer that Cain's was of lower quality. Okay, so here's Cain, and he's bringing a sacrifice because he knows he's got to accommodate this higher power. Without doing that, his whole project is in danger. But to give the best, the best for me, because I'm on the top of the chain here. I'm really the most important. I'll give something. I'll acknowledge and see if that does the job. Then Hevel, he sees what his brother did, and he thinks, wait a minute. I'm drifting because there's nothing of value in life. There's nothing of value in my individual life, but there could be something of value in attaching myself to something higher, something that's really valuable. It's his brother's initiative that gives Hevel the inspiration to bring a sacrifice. Now, Hevel brings the best. That's easy, because for Hevel, the best means nothing. Best, worst, so what? If I'm left to my own devices, it's all meaningless. But I'm not left to my own devices, and attaching myself to the Creator is my only way out. So I'm going to give the best. You see this in God's response to the two of them. I think the words of the Torah now become very, very poignant. Hevel is accepted because he brought the best. To Cain, God says, listen, I know what you're struggling with. I know it was a struggle to even bring mediocre. And you did that. It isn't right. When you offer a sacrifice to me, it ought to be the best. But I know you're struggling. Therefore, I'm encouraging you. If you improve, you'll be forgiven. And although sin is attacking you, you can overcome it. I'm not rejecting you. I'm inviting you to improve. So that's the difference between them. And the invitation is rejected. And Cain cannot live with the knowledge that his younger brother outperformed him, and he kills his younger brother. Okay, are we together so far? You see, yeah.
Obvious question, why doesn't then Hashem save Havel? Because, the brother connected, very nice, and then just another brother just kills him.
Okay, why didn't he save Havel? I'll tell you what Rabbi Orlovsky says. This is at least something to think about in this matter. Let's take big tragedies: earthquake, a fire, a war. You see all the suffering, and you say, "Look, these people are suffering, and they're all innocent. Why doesn't God prevent that?" Let's say it's a war in which 14,000 innocent people are killed. So suppose the person asks, and this is Rabbi Orlovsky speaking, so now suppose I say to him, I hear you, 14,000 innocent people were killed. Why didn't God stop that? I hear your question. Let me ask you a question. Suppose there had been 13,000. Would you still have had the question? Or 14,000 is a tragedy, 13,000 is okay. That's something which doesn't bother you. No, 13,000 bothers you, right? 12,000, okay, let's skip all the intermediary steps. One person, one innocent person, tortured and killed. He's innocent. Why should he be tortured and killed? Isn't that terrible? Why doesn't God stop it? Oh, but why must it be death? Suppose he's tortured and not killed. Still, he suffered pain, and he's innocent. So why shouldn't God stop that? Severe pain. How about mild pain? How about nicking your foot on a stone, which causes you a momentary pain? Who said you should have that momentary pain? If you're not guilty and you haven't done anything wrong, shouldn't God stop all pain? Shouldn't God stop all crime? But now, of course, if he did that, there'd be no free will. And surely you're not suggesting the world should be a world with no free will. So that means people have to have free will to do evil things. And even free will to do evil things that hurt other people. So then, once you say, Yeah, I guess stubbing your toe against a stone, I guess that ought to be in. So now where do you draw the line? Maybe God drew the line at 14,000. Maybe there could have been 28,000. It was only 14,000. So I think you have to be careful to take into account that evil is a big subject and it covers a lot of ground. And when you ask a question about one slice, you have to ask yourself how that question will fit with all the other slices. And it makes it a very difficult subject. This is not solving it, and it's not answering your question directly. It's pointing out that to do the right job, you'd have to do a much bigger job than it looks like on the surface. Okay, this is what the beginning of the Shem Shmuel. Then the Shem Shmuel says, we had an outcome here that Cain kills Hevel. The whole story has a replay. It has a replay. You probably, some of you know the story, but you're never told that it was a replay. And that's the story of Korach.
How would they tell if their offerings were accepted or not?
I'm sorry, say again?
How would they tell if and when their offerings were accepted? Was there some kind of sign? Did God speak to them? How did they know if their offering was accepted or denied?
Oh, that's a good question. There must have been something in the way in which it was what happened. You know, when we had the tabernacle, fire came from heaven to do that. So, but what it is, I don't know. Very often the Torah is very, very brief, and it tells you what happened, but it leaves open questions like that. But you're right, something happened. You know, when if you know the story, when Sarah was taken to the palace of Pharaoh, and there was a plague, and he calls Abraham in, and he says, "Why don't you tell me she's your wife?" So it doesn't say how he knew she was his wife. Doesn't say how he figured that out. Just from the fact that he accuses Abraham of lying to him, we know that that's what he found out. And so it leaves those things open. This is very, very typical of biblical literature. And often the Midrash will fill in that kind of information. I haven't studied the Midrash well, not really much at all. So that's where I would look to find an answer to that question. Now take a look at page 821. This is a rebellion of Korach against Moses and Aaron. I'm just interested in the challenge. Verse 3. They, Korach and all of his people, gathered together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, "It is too much for you, for the entire assembly, all of them, are holy, and Hashem is among them. Why do you exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem?" You, Moses and Aaron. Moses is the king, and Aaron is the high priest. We can't take that. If I asked you for one word to describe their complaint, what one word could you, what do they want? What are they holding up as the alternative to what Moshe and Aaron have done?
Exalt.
Say again?
Exalt. Like the accusation is, why did you exalt?
No, I'm asking you not for a word in the verse. I'm asking you for a word of your own. What are they promoting?
Right, their own status.
Communism.
Can't hear you.
Communism.
Oh, well, sort of. I mean, what communism was supposed to be, what didn't turn out. But why don't you say democracy? What's their complaint? Nobody's better than anybody else. We're all equal. We're all equal. The only way that somebody could get authority and leadership is if we give it to them. But we're all equal. Right? Is Korach right? Surely not. Surely not. Now tell me something. Does Korach have any problem with Hashem? Given this verse, just given what he says. Does Korach have any problem with Hashem?
No.
He mentions Hashem twice, positively. Congregation of Hashem. Hashem is in the congregation. he has no trouble with Hashem. He just has trouble with Moses and Aaron. This is like a parable that they tell in the Hasidic circles, that the Rabbi asked his Gabbai to check on one of his Hasidim, how he's doing spiritually, in particular his humility. And the Gabbai came back and he said, your Chassid is doing very well. He holds himself to be very small. It's just that he holds everybody else to be a little smaller. So, he's small, I guess, against the infinity of the Creator, he's small, but everybody else, a little smaller. So here is a partial rehabilitation of Cain. Cain was so full of himself, he couldn't submit himself to the Creator. Korach doesn't have trouble with the Creator. At least not according to this verse. No trouble with the Creator. He just has trouble with other people. So he's, in terms of overcoming his own sense of importance and talent and strength and success, he's overcome the challenge of submitting himself to the Creator, but not to other people. Okay. Now, let's see who Moses is. Take a look, page 795. Chapter 12, this is the famous incident where Miriam and Aaron speak against Moses. I'll start at the beginning of the chapter. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses regarding the Cushite woman. He married a Cushite woman, not interested in that, don't care about the marriage tonight now. They said, was it only to Moses that Hashem spoke? He did not speak to us as well. They have a complaint. Hashem heard. Now the man Moses was exceedingly humble, more than any person on the face of the earth. Aha. So Moses holds himself to be very, very small. Very, very small. Does that remind you of anybody? I've said other things about humility in other contexts. I know that. I'm talking about Shem Yishmuel now. Right? And then, when Hashem reprimands them and tells them you shouldn't have spoken about Moses, look at the very bottom of 795. Look at verse 7. Not so is my servant Moses. Who's Moses? Moses is someone who holds himself very, very small, and he's Hashem's servant. He's the rehabilitation of Hevel. Hevel, who thought, to myself, in my own self, I'm nothing. But how can I redeem myself from nothingness? By attaching myself to something higher. And Moses redeems himself by becoming, he's called twice in the Torah, the servant of Hashem, and nobody else is. Nobody else. So, says the Shem Yishmuel, you have a reincarnation, a Gilgul, of Cain and Hevel. Cain comes back as Korach, and Hevel comes back as Moses. And there's another altercation, another competition. And this time, Hevel kills Cain. Moses engineers the death of Korach. So it's like poetic justice. How many years later? More than 1,000 years later. And it means that what happened in the very beginning of the world, what happened later to Moses and Korach are linked to one another. That if you studied either story without the other, you're not getting the real picture. Which means that when you read a page with a story on it, your back of your mind has to be, maybe this is only part of the story, so I shouldn't draw any rapid conclusions from what I read on this page. And you see how things that happen, set up conditions for what happens later. This was what the Shem Yishmuel said on this parsha. Are we together?
Yeah. But did Moshe knew that he's reincarnated?
It's a good question. He might have known. The Arizal says there was Shais was in between. and the basis on the names and so on and so on. It could very well be that he knew, because the whole Beis Ne'eman who. The Rambam says that Moshe knew the whole of creation. The whole of creation, the whole of the Torah. So it could very well be that he knew that.
As souls go through different lives, are they performing better, right? Like, are they benefiting from, in some sense, the past experience of like their failed incarnations? And there's like a general, like, even though in terms of koach, like people are diminishing, is what they're doing with what they're given becoming better as we get closer, or?
Well, first of all, I don't think we could make a general statement that people's status, strength, spirituality are diminishing. You're referring to Yeshivat Ohr, which literally means the descent of the generations, but there's considerable literature on what that actually refers to. And some say, and I think this is the one that I can relate to the best, some say it is the very greatest leaders of the generation, which are continually decreasing in their power. But not the generation as a whole. Indeed, we are told that the generation of Chizkiyahu had a grasp of Torah knowledge superior to previous generations. Maybe not superior to all of them, but certainly superior to the ones directly preceding it. So the generations as a whole can go up and down. And just the very top. So therefore that question wouldn't be necessarily well-founded.
But it would still be shy to the people at the top, to the leaders in a sense.
Yeah, okay. But now, and you know, when a person, well, I'll just tell you just a little bit. Everything is divided up into ingredients. Only God is simple in the sense of pure, one-dimensional. Everything else has different ingredients combined together. The soul is like that also. When a person lives his life, various different events in his life present him opportunities to realize the potential of various different parts of the soul. So let's say there are 10, which is true. And let's say that a person's life enables him to perfect all except 1, 3, and 7. What happens now? So according to that result, what happens now is this. All the other parts of his soul are taken off and preserved on their own, because if they come back in another life, there's a chance that that which was perfected in the first life could be damaged in the second life. So we don't take any chances like that. That which was perfected is sequestered off. And the other 3, 1, 3, and 9, 7, I said, come back on their own. So you say, wait a minute, Rabbi, 1, 3, and 7 come back on their own. They're slices of a soul. How can a slice of a soul come back? What kind of life can it have? And the answer is that our picture of the way the world is divided up is that things are divided up into ingredients, but each ingredient subdivides. And each of the subdivisions subdivides unendingly. So if there's 1 through 10, you've got 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 to 3.10. So 3 has a whole 10 under it. So 3 can actually manage a life all by itself because it has all of that content under it. And 3.6 has 3.6.1 and 3.6.2 and 3.6.3, 3.6.4 under it. And those can manage lives also. That's one of the ways you explain that there are 600,000 root Jewish souls, but there can be millions of Jews. How does that happen? Because each of those root souls can express itself in many offshoots. The grand origin of this idea is that Adam's soul contained all human souls. Now you got a lot of decimal points. Just you can divide up into as many as you like. It's just 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So that's how you get them. That's how you get them coming back, and they come back in such a way that now this can be fixed, right? And then this particular part of the soul will face challenges which are for the sake of the incomplete realization of the potentiality of that part of the soul. And I think you could see this a little bit in the nature of human abilities and human intellect and human creativity, that as the population vastly expands, the scope of creativity becomes narrower and narrower. If we leave the history of the Jewish people out of the picture, a case could be made that the greatest human intellect of all time, so far anyway, is Aristotle. Aristotle founded whole new disciplines. He created whole new methodologies. He created whole new techniques. My field of formal logic was invented by Aristotle. And classification of animals and plants and so on and so on. And framework for metaphysics. And speculating about the stars and about the origin of the universe and so on and so on. Not that the great cow was slaughtered by the dragon, and his blood, drops of blood formed. I'm talking about myth. I'm talking about philosophical speculation and understanding. Today, people who are great by taking 1/1000th of the concerns of mankind and becoming specialists and doing a real great job. I mean, Einstein didn't contribute anything to medicine, nor to metallurgy, nor the history of China. He had one thing in which he made spectacular contribution, but it was a very narrow contribution. If we really are offshoots of the iteration of breaking down the souls, then it's plausible that our lives become narrower and narrower. It's a plausible presentation of that idea. That's just an observation about the world in terms of so anyway, that's what the Shem Yishmael says about this. Are we together so far?
Yes.
Okay, so now, what does this mean for us? First of all, this is the first story in the Torah of the response, the idea of doing tshuva. Adam violated God's will, so did Chava, and they were punished. There we see crime and punishment. But here we see Kadosh Baruch Hu offering tshuva as a response. It means that when a person commits a crime, there's a way out. Im teitiv se'es. If you improve, then the sin will be forgiven. According to the verse that we read about God's message to Cain, how long do you have to do tshuva?
Forever.
Well, not quite. Think again.
Once.
Until you're dead, right? Until you're dead.
Forever for you.
Yeah, right. I knew that's what you meant, but I want you to learn to speak carefully. Not forever. There's a Rashba on that. It says when a Jewish person is a slave to another Jew, and after 7 years he's supposed to go out, and he decides not to go out, and so if he doesn't want to go out, they put a hole in his ear, and you tell him that you're really not doing the right thing, and then it says, V'avado la'olam, you should serve him forever. And the Talmud comments, olam means until the Jubilee. And the naive reader who reads one sentence and then writes his paper on the faults he found in the Torah, a lot of which there are thousands of people, says, well, it says forever. And the Talmud says only up until the Jubilee. So the Talmud is just inventing things and changing the text. And we can therefore eat cheeseburgers and, the whole song and dance. The Rashba says in the Tshuva, really? Serve him forever? Is his master going to live forever? Really? So what did the Torah mean when it said forever? It must have meant up to some fixed period of time. Why would La'olam mean up to some fixed period of time? Says Maimonides in the guide, because the Tanakh has another phrase for forever, a different phrase, not La'olam. The phrase for forever is La'olam Va'ed. That means forever. And since that means forever, we can leave off Va'ed. It doesn't mean forever. Oh ho! So the academic can take his paper and burn it in the fireplace and leave us alone. So the same thing. So that's the forever we meant, right? So he has until death to do tshuva. Now, suppose he doesn't do tshuva. What does the verse say about that? Well, it says the sin is waiting at the opening, crouching at the opening. Opening of what? There are lots of things that have openings. That's what's wrong in the translation of door. The word here is Pesach, not Delis. The word in Hebrew for door is Delis. Here it's Pesach. Pesach means opening. So Rashi says 4 words. And in those 4 words, he encapsulates the whole philosophy. The Pesach Kivrecha Chata'acha Shamur. At the opening of your grave, your sin is preserved. What does that mean? That means that death is not an escape. It means if you don't do tshuva by the time you die, then you pay for it after you die. There's a lot encapsulated in this short verse. That you can do tshuva to correct it and purify yourself, that you have to the end of your lifetime to do tshuva, and that you don't do tshuva, that death is not the end. How much can you pack into like 10 words? You can pack a lot if you think about it. So this, and by the way, the Gaon of Vilna said, I think this is maybe true of other literatures as well, but he said when the first time something's mentioned, usually either encapsulates or gives an insight into its essence. And here you have a great deal packed into these few verses. And in particular, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you, particularly the idea of sacrifice. The ancient idea of sacrifice was this. It was economic. The gods have things that we want. Little things like victory in battle and long life and good health and productivity. Little things. We have things that they want. For some reason, they want fattened bullocks and the best wine and fine flour. That's what they want. Let's make a deal. We'll give you animals and wine and flour, and you'll give us victory in war and long life and health and productivity. Exchange. So, when a person offers a sacrifice, according to their picture, how does it go? The gods look down and say, oh, he put an animal on the altar, did he? Let's check. How old was it? Healthy? Was it fat? Yeah. Wow. Good stuff. Victory in the next battle. That's their picture. But our picture is, God doesn't need anything. The whole idea, God needs something. Come on. God's the creator and sustainer of the whole universe. He needs your animals? Give me a break. It's ridiculous. Elamah, you have a certain relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and the sacrifice is supposed to reflect that relationship. It's supposed to express that relationship. That's why God turns to and accepts Hevel and his sacrifice. Hevel first, sacrifice second. It isn't the sacrifice that motivates God to relate to Hevel in a certain way. It's his relationship with Hevel that leads him to respond to the sacrifice in a certain way. And that's why when Cain offers a substandard sacrifice, he doesn't crash on him. Because he says, I know who you are. I know where you're coming from. I know you're climbing out of a very deep hole, and you're making an effort, and I applaud that. I'm giving you reinforcement. If someone who wasn't struggling in that way and was just unconcerned about the quality of what he gives God, he would get a different response. Same sacrifice, different response. Because it's coming from a different relationship. So you get an insight into sacrifices here. This verse, read carefully, gives the lie to the whole ancient picture of sacrifices. And these are the first sacrifices. So like the cross said, first time something's mentioned, it gives you an insight into its essence. But this is just a little example of what you can get. if you read and if you consult the genuine commentators. Okay? See you tomorrow. Yes, Hashem.